the session on Europe and China-U.S. relations. Should Israel be taking notes? Now, some might wonder, why did we choose this session specifically, and why do we dedicate some time to discussing, of all issues, China-U.S., China-European relations and the European approach towards China and vice versa. But I think we think that it actually can shed light on understanding the dynamics behind how China views the world and how other countries are also facing some of the dilemmas that we are facing too. I will introduce Dr. Xu, who is with the Center for
China Institute of International
Studies, exactly,
yeah.
Which is a think tank of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China. So essentially, Dr. Xu advises, and she works for the Department of European Studies at the China Institute. And in that respect, they advise the Chinese government on European issues. And she's an expert on China-European relations and on European integration. And while we are waiting for Ambassador Talo to join us, Dr. Xu, President Xi was recently in Europe. Mm-hmm. He visited France, he visited Serbia, he visited Hungary.
Mm-hmm.
What is the strategy of China vis-a-vis Europe? Does it really want to divide and conquer? Does it really want to separate Europe from the United States? Do you think it's achieving any progress in that respect? Please.
I think China and Europe for a long time with each other as partners. And China never changed its position even now. So in this visit, you know that we're still stressful. We are partners. We are not rivals or competitors. We're still trying to find our common consensus and the benefits and interests. So I think this is our big direction in this area. So for China, we take EU as one important pole in the multipolarity world and key players in multilateral cooperation and global governance and dialogue among different civilizations. So I think European side has echoed and responded to this area positively. And I think in this visit, the two sides reached the various cooperation consensus. So this is our basis.
I understand, but you must admit, at least from my point of view, if I'm looking at this from the side, vis-a-vis the visit of President Macron, I understand his visit to Paris. Paris is, France is one of the major European powers.
Yeah.
But then his next stops are Serbia. Why Serbia? It's not even a member of the European Union yet. So, there are other countries he could have visited, I'm sure. Why Serbia?
China and Serbia has very long historical strong relations with each other. Even though Serbia is not a big country, but it has the historical, destiny or the fortune.
You're talking about the days of Yugoslavia, I assume. That the days of Tito and Yugoslavia, which was before Serbia was born after the end of the Cold War. You're referring to that old relationship. I understand. So it has nothing to do with the fact that that there is an attempt on behalf perhaps of China and Russia to drive a wedge in Europe. That's pure, how would I say it, Cold War mentality?
I don't think so. In our regards, China and Serbia demonstrated new types of relationship cooperation. Like we take small country equally in our relationship in Europe. And Serbia is also a very important country in our Middle East European country cooperations. We have lots of common interests in economic field, and also we have a lot of exchange of cultures like that. We just want to make this visit demonstrated different type of relationship we have with Europe, not just big countries, also small countries, also countries that not belongs to European Union. We have France, it's in Western Europe. We have Hungary, that's in Eastern Europe. We also have Serbia. It's outside of European Union, just like that.
I see. We were supposed to have Ambassador Talo with us, and I was about to ask him a question about Italy's withdrawal from the BRI on one hand, and its fascination and interest with the new project called, which isn't still is still on paper, the IMEC, the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor, that was announced. Oh, and just I'm saying that, and then we see Ambassador Talo joining us, but still I'll complete my question to you. When you, in September last year, the EU and 3 European countries, France, Germany, and Italy, signed a memorandum of understanding that alongside India, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE to establish an economic corridor connecting Europe and India through the Middle East. How does China view this project, even though it's still on the paper? Does China have a view of this? On IMEC? Dr. Xu?
You asked me?
Yes, of course.
Okay. I'm not sorry. I didn't hear it clearly. Can you repeat
All
your
right, so I'll
question?
repeat it very briefly. What is China's approach to the India, Middle East, European corridor that was announced last September?
Yeah. I'm not quite familiar with the
All
India
right,
issue.
I understand. Then I will ask Ambassador. Fine. I'm
Okay,
not familiar with
okay,
everything,
that's fine.
but I'll ask Ambassador Talo. Because Ambassador Talo, you until recently, and I'm introducing you to the audience, you now are a senior advisor to the Minister of Defense, but you're also the diplomatic advisor to Prime Minister Meloni, and you accompanied her to the G20 summit in New Delhi in September, where the memorandum of understanding signing, establishing the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor was announced. And a few months later, if I recall correctly, Italy decided to withdraw from the BRI. Why did Italy go for, I say politely, go for IMEC and withdraw from BRI?
Thank you. I would not emphasize a relationship between the two facts. As it has been also stressed during another session earlier, there are differences between BRI and IMEC, so one cannot consider IMEC as an alternative to BRI, as a sub BRI. They have quite a different character. So the two.
Granted. So let me take you back to the BRI decision and to the dilemmas that Italy faced when it had to weigh, do we continue with BRI or withdraw from BRI?
Well,
Can you give us some background to this calculus?
Yes. Well, now just to connect with the previous question. So for IMEC, we consider the interest of having an interesting vision, a positive vision, which is a regional one, and important advantages, a very concrete one. Even if they are for the future. I mean, there is nothing in this moment implemented. For BRI, we had an experience of a few years without important results, and we just wanted. I mean, I'm not now in an official position, but I think that what is relevant is that there is the interest to develop an important relationship with China, but not necessarily through the BRI. Actually, BRI is a tool which is used almost only with the different kind of countries. Italy was the only country to have to be part of this program. So it was an exception. Now, intention is to be like other 7 European countries, to have good and important economic relationship with China, without necessarily to have be part of BRI. In fact, I think it was we had a very good dialogue with counterparts, and now this dialogue is continuing, and there are good perspectives to have a relationship similar to the one that is between China and Germany or France, which never joined BRI, and have a much more important, a much larger trade relationship and economic relationship with China. So BRI for us was not such a big deal on the economic point of view, because end of the day is an economic relationship.
I understand, but let me just make it a bit harder for you then, if you don't mind. But let's you're talking about the commercial interests, you're talking about geopolitical interests, but to what extent? And you've been seeing also when you served as Italy's permanent representative to NATO, then later on with serving alongside the Prime Minister, there is this constant evaluation vis-a-vis China of commercial interests, geopolitical interests of your own country, and also the U.S. U.S. involvement in this process. How has this relationship shifted in the past few years? Is Europe getting closer to China, growing more distant from China? The war in Ukraine is obviously interfering here. Your thoughts, and then I'll go back to Dr. Xu.
Well, I think, of course, I mean, one has to take into account many factors. The current war of aggression, Russian aggression to Ukraine, is part of the global picture. China is out of it. Of course, we are following the Russian-Chinese relationship, but I don't think that this is a main factor in our relationship. We only want to have, let's say, a good bilateral or multilateral relationship about the European Union, because speaking about economy, Europe has must have a major role. And on the same time, of course, we have to take into account our interest in order that this relationship is fair and is based on considerations on our own security. Then you take into account these aspects, of course, we are all like to have a win-win possibility of growing together. So this is the harmonious way to grow, to work for common interests. When we have common interests, we can do things. When we don't have common interests, we see that there are not. I mean, not mandatory to work together. Why, for instance, we have other relationships. BRI was not the case. Bilateral agreements and dialogue can certainly be useful, both at national or EU level. And then, of course, take into consideration common general interest in what this morning has been called common goods, for instance, freedom of navigation. I think that we all share the interest of having freedom of navigation when we consider the situation in the Red Sea. A country like China is a very strong importer, but also somehow an important importer of goods, should have this same interest that we in Europe are having, that our goods can flow without problem in the Indo-Pacific and Mediterranean.
Thank you, Ambassador Talo. Dr. Shu, coming back to you. And, I apologize for being a bit straightforward. To what extent has the war in Ukraine affected China's position in Europe from your perspective? And how has China tried to deal with this?
I think from China's point of view, China-EU relations have heavily burdened by the Ukraine conflict because China is not one party of the conflict. And now we think EU want to bind China-EU relations to China-Russia relations. We think this is unnecessary and unreasonable. I think like many other global South countries, China sees its relationship with Russia is independent and not against the third party. So it should not be pressured or coerced by others. But currently, lots of Europeans think China-Russia cooperation is against Europe's interest. We think that is not reasonable. And for China, we think China-EU relations is should be more robust and not be burdened by this conflict.
All right. Ambassador Talo, any thoughts on your side?
Well,
because in a way, because in a way I think, although there are differences, of course, that just as China's response to the war in Ukraine has affected relations with Europe, China's response to the war in Gaza is affecting its relations with Israel and with other partners. So, how do you see this from a European perspective? China's relations vis-a-vis actors in the Middle East and vis-a-vis Russia.
well, an important power like China is relevant always I mean, it's the nature of being an important power and the responsibilities which are inherent with this status. So it is completely justified and actually necessary that China takes its own responsibilities, and that China has a role as one of the main global players. This is part of history. China is one of the top players in the world. So whatever it does can have implications both with the aggression of Russia um, towards Ukraine or Israeli-Palestinian conflict, including the aggression of Hamas to Israel. So the situation can be different case to case, and we consider what is being done and hope, of course, that there will be no sustain to Russia in any form, also in indirect form. On the other hand, we hope that there can be a very constructive support from China, for instance, also in the UN, to the construction of a two-state position, a two-state solution, which is the solution supported both by China and the European Union, hopefully also from Israel.
Well, we have to stop here at this point. I want to thank you both, Dr. Xu, at this rather late hour in Beijing. I want to thank you, Ambassador Talo, for taking the time to join us again today. And I want to invite Felice Witter to the stage. Thank you very much.